I mean, go
All right.
on.
Oh
Uh,
yeah. Since you can see, is my Christmas tree showing behind me? I'm not trying to have that showing
I
because
still
that's
see you're in the
technically live.
festive season, but we are. I'm guessing. I still see we're in the festive season.
I'm trying to block it out.
Yo, my tree leaves are out, man. Like I don't know if you see it, but are we live? Is this live right now? It says that it's on air, so hopefully it's on air.
It says live, but no one can see it right now. Like it says no people viewing. I got like a little icon in the top left.
Yeah, it is live.
Oh, and we have one viewer.
Fantastic. So, Fred, pleasure connecting with you after all these times, man. This is my first time actually doing a stream on YouTube, a live stream. So, glad to connect with you.
Likewise, man. It's been way too long, but you know it's a great way to start the year. This is my first collaboration of the year as well. So I think who better to do it with than someone who we go way back, and I've seen how your channel has grown. So it's definitely good to be back and good to start the year talking to you and obviously talking with Khalid as well.
Fantastic. And we've got also Khalid Farooq on the line with us. So just by means of introduction, Khalid Farooq is a local-based collector here in the UAE. We've done many videos together. I don't want to sort of throw out the statement that he's pro Patek. I'll give him the liberty to discuss that later. Khalid, meet Khalid. And Khalid, we've got Fred from Shah Lusso. Me and Fred know each other for, I don't know how long. Is it 2 years or a year?
Must be coming up on a year. I don't know. My concept of time is gone completely because of COVID. But yeah, it's been a long time. Back since like 500 subscribers. That's the only measure I have that I can keep track of.
Fantastic. So This is me patching you guys together.
Great nice to meet you, Fred. Great to meet you, and it's always a pleasure to meet people with the same passion for watches. Brother is doing a really great job at that. He's bringing us all together in more than one instance. So it's great to see you, Fred, and speak to you today.
Likewise. Obviously, I've been following some of your collection being featured on Rida's channel. And yeah, it's great. It's one of the best things about this hobby and about being online is being able to connect with other collectors and other enthusiasts for the hobby.
We've got two viewers on the channel, and I hope you guys are able to hear me. This is the first time that I do a live. I want to make sure you guys are also able to interact with us. So if you would be kind enough to drop a hello message, just so I know I'm receiving your messages. If you guys have any questions, you can ask through the video as well. Okay. I hope I did enable
the chat.
Did I?
I'm not sure. I'm looking through. Oh no, I think that's the support line.
Okay. All right. Interesting. So hopefully that's enabled. All right. Okay. So the topic basically. So there's a few things that I wanted to talk to you about. Khalid, once again, a pleasure having you on board with me and Fred today. I know you have a soft spot for Patek, but what I wanted to discuss today is basically, of course, you have Patek, AP, and Rolex. They all have solid markets, great interest, and great outlook. I would say for AP, even especially for me, for my recent acquisition, I started doing some digging specifically about the Royal Oak. The 40 years, they go way back basically in terms of that model range. And Francois Henry's new mission to close down distribution channels basically across different parts of the world. This was a plan that, the strategy for it came in early 2018, I believe, based on a Thomson report that I've read. But this plan is actually now in motion. And what I wanted to understand basically is the impact of that. What are your thoughts basically on distribution channels closing in different parts of the world and AP dealing directly with its customers? Do you feel like this is going to add to the exclusivity of AP? Is it going to uplift other model ranges from AP, your Code 5911 and what's not? What are your thoughts on that, Khalid?
Thank you, Rida. I think it's a great question, but I'd like to say something. I saw one of your banners which said AP the new the Patek for 2021. Now, just to answer that, you see, if they want to compete, if AP wants to compete with Patek, don't get me wrong, I love AP as a brand, but if they want to compete with Patek, they're already doing that for decades. right? Now, by commercializing or taking away certain businesses that that are the authorized dealers for AP here, will that push their agenda further? I highly doubt it. It's going to be the same, to be honest. And it may also be a little bit more difficult now to get certain pieces. You see, I personally myself, I've not been able to purchase any AP from the authorized dealer, but I still see some, as I say, some light on under the tunnel after passing through the tunnel. That you would be able to get an AP piece directly from the dealer while it is here with an authorized dealer. Commercializing it, if you say that this is going to make them a little bit more superior to Patek or going on the same lines of Patek, I highly doubt, because if that was the case, Patek would have done it way back, but Patek have never done it, and for that matter, Rolex have also not done it. So AP changing strategy may mean something, but I don't see a big impact. And I think, especially around the Middle East, we really appreciate when authorized dealers are, dealers from the country itself. We like to buy from our own people. And once we see that it is out, I'm not gonna say that a lot of people are going to be discouraged to buy it. Obviously, it's AP, everybody will buy. But in this area, Middle East specifically, I don't think it's necessarily going to be a very good idea to do that. But again, let's see what happens, and only time can tell. But in my humble opinion, I feel it's not a good idea to take away authorized dealers. AP specifically trying to commercialize and having their own boutiques here in the region.
Fred, what is your thoughts on that, Fred?
I definitely agree to a degree with Khalid. I don't think it's going to be something that will necessarily dethrone Patek, so to speak. But in the same way, like he mentioned, they've been competing for decades. But I do think this will change the dynamic of that competition. I think fundamentally what AP is doing is they're trying a different strategy, but also I think as a brand, the two brands, while still I think operating in a very similar echelon price range, and both have a lot of history, they have generally different strategies. I would say you can even see that in their model line. AP, in my view, has always been a little bit more happy to experiment, a little bit more happy to try something new and different. And definitely this is I think at least a very 21st century strategy for them to do. They're breaking with what has been the traditional model for watches for God knows how long, of, selling through authorized dealers, instead trying to control their brand a little bit better. And it'll be interesting to see how it works. In my view, I think it's a good thing because it helps them at least manage their brand and brand perception better, and also maybe have a bit of a closer hold on how things work in terms of selling directly to collectors, to end consumers, versus selling to people who are going to resell them. I mean, that's one of the vulnerabilities of the distributor model, is that you have less control over your brand. What that means for us as collectors, I think, is that at the end of the day, it means that the brand is a little bit closer to the collector. It means they can get more feedback.
100%.
And I'd be interested to see how they handle regional concerns, like what Khalid mentioned, of, in certain parts of the world, you want to buy from your own people. You want to make sure that your boutiques are culturally adapted as well. So I'd be interested to see if they're taking that into consideration in how they're establishing their own boutiques. I mean, I've only been to the AP boutique just briefly when I went to Dubai for my trip last year. How would you guys say that the experience is there compared to maybe AP boutiques in other countries? Like, do you feel like they've adapted locally, or does it feel like sort of a...
Before we jump into that point, Fred, and Paul, sorry to cut you. I just want to elaborate a little bit more on what you and Khalid said. So I think maybe we're looking at it from a perspective of, all right, I'm not saying AP is going to absolutely close relationships with distribution channel partners or authorized dealers. That's not the only part to it. It's also in respect to the people-to-people concept that Francois Henry is making a lot of efforts to radically change basically the way the brand communicates with people. And we're not talking here about complication, Khalid. We're not talking about, who has a higher tier. But what I'm saying is basically, one, what contributes to that exclusivity is that today, if I want to go get a 15450, 15500, I'll go, even if I'm not a AP customer, I'll pop over to AP Boutique because they're right here through the authorized seller or dealer, and express interest in whatever it is. Now, on the flip side of the coin, when that's not available, when they don't have a branch in that country, of course, that's another layer of exclusivity. That's one factor. The other part as well, I'm not saying that they're going to dethrone Patek. That's not the aim here. But what I'm saying is that in terms of that exclusivity, that is going to basically generate even much more demand. In terms of the fact that there is a lot of interest for Patek. I spoke to many aftermarket pre-owned luxury watch dealers, and what they tell me is that on a regular for the past year, they're getting more requests for Patek, Royal Oaks, even Offshores AP Royal Oaks and Offshores over Patek. So if you look at it from that angle, especially now, this year, 2020, the year that had passed, with the urge that Ovid created for a lot of these brands to consider selling high luxury watches on an online stream. So it used to be the experience as part of it. I want to go to the boutique and I want to pick it up and I want to engage with people there. But you see now a lot of brands, selling online. AP is also considering that, right? So I feel like all of this is a revamp to exclusivity that will increase in 2021. I mean, I'm not sure again if I made my point there, if you guys have any input on it.
Rada, I think it's exactly the same. Just a point on what Fred said. It's exactly this. The experience is exactly the same when you also go to a boutique in Europe. I mean, I can tell you that I've been to many boutiques in Europe, and I get, I get told the same thing. You first need to have, you have to have a base. You need to buy certain pieces, and then we're going to be talking about some of the most serious pieces, if you like. But what is there to buy in AP apart from Royal Oaks? Offshores, divers, the code. The code does not come in steel. I think that's going to change when they change from precious metals and start creating pieces of the code in steel. And there, one thing also what that we understand.
Based on you're saying this is based on the current market interest for steel watches?
Correct. So if they really focus on steel, and especially in this region, right? I don't want to talk. I cannot talk about the other regions because I'm not aware of that. But I'm aware of this region. Also us, mostly we prefer to wear steel or platinum material watches rather than white, gold, and gold. So if they introduce more steel watches, even the code, especially the chronograph ones that look beautiful, you will see a demand coming up in AP quite a bit. But just to go back to one of your points, you said that these dealers are receiving a lot of interest from the Royal Oak side. I think that is obvious, and that makes sense because you can't get a steel Patek. Very difficult. But Royal Oaks are still considerably better in comparison to what you would see in an Atlas and an Aquanaut. So when you see a demand going up in the Royal Oaks, it makes sense. Same way if you go and look at Rolex. Rolex is a mass producer, right? But in comparison to AP and Patek, you have a better chance of getting a Rolex than getting a Patek or an AP from the boutique or from the authorized dealers, just because of the production numbers. So as you said, makes sense. I agree with you, but I don't see a lot of change happening there if it moves from an authorized dealer to a direct boutique. It's still going to be the same process. Yes, you may receive certain pieces, but the same thing here. You can also receive those pieces when it's with the authorized dealer. What difference will it bring to the region? I'm not too sure. But
before, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Khalid. Please. Yeah, no, but that being said, if you were to compare it to Europe, the point that I was trying to make is that I feel it's exactly the same as it is. You've also been to boutiques. I'm sure Fred has been to those boutiques. If you come to the boutiques here in the UAE, there is actually two boutiques. There's one in Al Barsha Mall of Emirates, and there's another one in Dubai Mall. You can go to those two boutiques, and you will see it's very similar, a very similar experience to the ones that you find in Europe. I don't see any difference, to be honest. So I would be, I mean, it would be interesting to see what would happen in the other regions, and if they are actually branching out and having their own boutiques everywhere. I know that they have boutiques in certain places, but again, in comparison to how you treat those boutiques to this region, you really need to study the market before getting into it. That would be my advice.
Before I give you back my comment, I just thought maybe we take in some questions. I see some questions popping in. So so-called watch reviews, what's going on, brother? Of course, Miguel is in
What's
the
up,
house.
Miguel?
We've got basically a question from Diana T. Hi all, don't you think there will be more transparency without the middleman, between parentheses, ADs? Of course, that's a very different way to look at it. And more chances for regular customers to get their hands on APs. What are your thoughts, Fred, on that question?
I think that in the broad scheme, most likely, it's based on the assumption that obviously the brand wants its watches to get to the end customer more than to a reseller. It's always a little bit dicey with how it is, because at the end of the day, in the traditional model, it's a wholesale distribution. At the end of the day, what's their bottom line is distributors buying from them, not so much customers buying from them. Now, obviously, that's changing as they are selling direct to customer. So it'll be interesting to see how that balances out. My theory would be that it is possible. Whether that pans out in a practical sense, obviously, it depends how they want to run their business and how they want to make sure that that's perceived. Something that I was curious about after what Khalid said, saying that when he had gone to boutiques in Europe, that they still sort of said, you need to start by these certain heavy hitting pieces. I'd be interesting to see that as they consolidate their distributor network and start selling direct to customer, will that mean also that instead of you having to build a relationship with each AD in different countries, if it could get to the point where, for example, if you've bought in the UAE at the AP boutique, does that previous purchase history still carry over if you go to an AP boutique in London, for example? I think that's something where there could be that advantage, because then they're keeping the business within the brand itself, as opposed to it then being subjective to how different ADs handle it. I think that would be an advantage on the consumer side if that's the direction they go to. If they can really get to the point where you feel like, hey, I can go to my local AP boutique, and then when I go on vacation or when I travel on business, I can go to another AP boutique, and I know that I will still get treated as if I'm their customer, even if I haven't stepped into that shop before.
Okay. Khalid, what are your thoughts on that? Do you feel like this will create more transparency directly with the brand, eliminating ADs out?
I will answer that, but there's one very important thing that Fred has brought up here, whether your previous history is going to be taken into account. Well, I can tell you out of experience that with other brands, that has not been the case. There have been other brands which have come out of family businesses here in the UAE. And when you go to these actual respective brands, when they become independent, and you ask them that, well, I have purchased these pieces from the authorized dealer, would you take that into account? And the answer to that is always no. You now have to buy a new piece from me so that it can go into your profile, and then we can talk about some of these pieces which we'd want to give to you. So that maybe AP does it differently, as you rightly said, and if they do that, well and good. But I doubt, because most of the brands that have moved out of certain umbrellas that they were in with these certain retailers in the past have taken the approach of, no, you need to be a new customer, you need to buy certain pieces so that we can now go on and give you some of these hot pieces. In terms of transparency, I don't really see a change, honestly, Rada. And because I know that Fred is saying, he said that they want pieces to go to collectors rather than dealers. But today, if you see, there are many collectors today, but when you look at a person, after a certain amount of time, there are many people, I'm not saying 100% of them, but I'm saying at least 60 or 70% of them, there comes a time where they start getting bored of what they wear. And they're like, this is collecting dust in my collection. What do I do with it? And they go and they upgrade. Now, the moment that happens, and some brand comes and identifies that, they're going to be like, okay, so now I thought that this person is a collector. Well, he still is a collector. But what has happened is that he wanted to upgrade, and he's looked at the price of this watch in the market, and he goes and he upgrades that watch. As an example, somebody having a Royal Oak and wanting to upgrade to 15202 because he cannot get a 15202 from the boutique easily, regardless whether it's an independent boutique or it's a retailer. He goes and he gives in his AP and adds money onto it and gets a 15202. Now, the moment the brand identifies that, if they identify that, firstly, he's there's gonna be a big question mark on his, first of all, his reputation with the brand. So
you think so?
Again, of course, definitely.
Really?
All of these things, yeah, definitely. All of these things today are also affecting the market that we have in the UAE. So I will not see a big change in that, to be honest. So when you say
sorry to interrupt you, Khalid, but just let me recap that point again. So you're saying if I'm, if I own a 15500 and I want to get a 15202 and I'm not able to get it, whether it be through the brand or the authorized dealer, if I go to the aftermarket, top up the price, basically pay the premium to get the 15202, that would affect my relationship with the brand. Is that what you're saying?
Definitely.
It's an interesting point, because you're right. We have been talking about it so far in terms of the advantages, but obviously by them also centralizing that knowledge, centralizing who has which model, it means it can also work to your disadvantage if, they decide that, you essentially didn't hold on to that watch long enough. How do they define that? How can you determine what is essentially an acceptable amount of time, I guess, to hold a watch until you sell it? Because you're right, at the end of the day, collectors still resell, still want to upgrade, not out of a particular profit interest, but instead just out of wanting to further themselves in the hobby.
I can understand that if I'm selling it.
Necessarily have a collection of 500 watches. Sometimes you want to trade in.
True.
So it's a great point.
I can understand that if I'm selling it, but buying it, I mean, I don't know.
See,
how is that a bad thing?
You are trading it. You're trading it, and then you're topping up and buying another piece.
Sure. But what we're saying here, Khalid, Fred, is that I'm not able to get the 15202 from the boutique or the authorized dealer, which is, of course, the case. Why would there be any issues if I go buy it outside? It's only logical that I go outside if I can't get it through the boutique. I thought it was the other way around. If I'm selling it, that's an issue.
Because because you're using the difference. So you buy a watch for, let's say, 50,000, right, or 60,000, and then you go to the market, and the market is paying you around 90,000 for it, and then you're gonna add X amount to go and buy the 15202. You are leveraging on that difference of the market. You understand? And that's what the brand comes back and tells you, well, why are you doing that? You're making money out of this purchase, and now since you're making money, you're adding up to it and you're getting a 15202. It's as if the brand is saying you're abusing me, right? I am trusting you as a collector. I'm giving you a piece. The market value of this piece is much higher, and I am actually choosing you rather than someone else to get this piece. And when you get it, the first thing you do, or let's say after a few months, you want to get a 15202 and you really want to get that piece, you go in and you give in your 15500, the difference you add on and you take a 15202. Now, if the brand gets to know about that, they're going to be upset. Same thing with Patek, same thing with Rolex. This is our part of the world. Again, I will not talk about the other regions. I am not aware of what happens there, but here, 100%, this is what happens.
Going back to that point as well, I mean, maybe Fred, you can educate us through your travels and meeting with different, I guess, authorized dealers for different brands. So in the Middle East, a reputable, obviously authorized dealer is Ahmed Siddiqui and Sons. They're one of the best ones. They're one of the biggest actually authorized dealers, and they're amazing actually. The relationship you get basically from visiting any of the big brand, Rolex, AP, or whatever it may be, is always sort of a people to people type of approach. It's very interesting, right? But I understand that this is not a unified way of basically doing business for, say, other authorized dealers in different parts of the world.
No, I think it's the same. I think it's the same.
Really? Yeah, because I heard stories.
Yeah.
Because I heard
Sorry,
stories.
I just didn't hear that last part.
Yeah, I think I had it on mute by accident. So just going back to that point, because I heard stories where in other authorized dealers in different parts of the world, they would actually ask you to buy different pieces before getting the one that you really want. That never really happened here with the local authorized dealer in Dubai.
Do you want me to tell you something? A very interesting story. A few of my friends had purchased a watch from Europe. Okay, and without name dropping on the actual authorized dealer, that dealer told them, fine, you get this Rolex, but the actual warranty card is going to stay with me for a period of 1 year, and after a year I'm going to ship this
I've heard this before.
this warranty card to you. Now and he was surprised. He's like, what? Like, yes, you take the watch, I give you the invoice, I give you everything, but the warranty card is going to stay with me and I'll ship it to you in 1 year's time. And why that happens is because obviously when a new watch comes without a warranty card, a lot of question marks comes up in the mind of the buyer and the whichever dealer that you go to when you ask them, well, somebody's trying to sell, the first thing that comes to the mind of the dealer, why is a brand new watch coming with coming without a warranty card? And that again starts bringing down the price of the watch, and in addition, it also starts creating question marks in their mind. How did he buy a watch like this? Where did he get it from? 1 million questions come up, and probably in the end, the person that's even buying it will probably get put off and not buy the watch. So these things are happening, and this, I'm telling you, there's somebody in Europe, right? Very similar, because it's not only about what the authorized dealer does. Obviously, the brand themselves also tell the authorized dealers what are some of the things that they need to comply to, what are some of the things that they need to take into consideration when these things happen. So it's not only about authorized dealers, they get instructions as well from the brand, right? So that's what makes sense, because eventually it's also the reputation of the brand, and the brand needs to have a hold on how these things also take place when authorized dealers. I mean, that's at least what I think. Again, I could be wrong, but when you've got other dealers out, in Europe and US and places out of the Middle East doing similar things, it starts to make sense now that it's a general consensus around most of this type of business.
Yeah, I think I've heard stories of the same sort of thing happening in the United States, and I think in the UK as well, with the same sort of practice, withholding the warranty card to essentially discourage it being resold quickly. And you hear all sorts of, it's the same thing with how different ADs will handle wait lists, whether it's an actual wait list where they have a fixed number, whether they'll tell you right up, or whether they'll sort of beat around the bush a little bit for you to understand what it is you need to do to be able to get it. And that, it's kind of the advantage and disadvantage of the AD model, because while on the upside, it means that you can go to 4 or 5 different ADs and try your luck. On the downside, though, obviously, it means that there's no consistency for customers who perhaps are starting out, or if they're not necessarily savvy to what you need to do to get some of these hot pieces if you want to get them at the boutique. With looking at the sort of more direct to consumer model that AP is adopting, there will be some consistency, I think, in terms of what needs to be done to obtain a hot piece. But the downside is you don't have that flexibility. You don't have that choice of, well, I want to go to another boutique and try my luck, because they'll give you the same story. And again, it's how do you determine what is genuinely fair to the end consumer? You know, something like a Royal Oak might be someone's grail watch that they save up and work hard. They want to buy that watch. They want to just have it. They don't plan to resell it. But they might not be able to get an advantage if the decision from the brand is that, oh, we want to make sure they have XYZ amount of purchase history. So bringing it back to that topic, I guess that's one of the disadvantages. While there may be more consistency in how one can obtain one of the hard-to-get pieces, it also means that as consumers, we don't have flexibility. And then what does that mean? That means that the consumer has no choice but then go to the gray market and pay a premium, which, again, it's always that sort of discussion between what is essentially free market and what is something that's more tightly regulated. They have their pros and cons.
True, Fred. I agree with you. But
if you guys don't mind, there was a question that had just come in as well. So just to make it a little bit more interactive, I don't know if you guys see the questions on the screen as well. Do you?
Yeah, I've got them.
Yeah.
Okay, so Fred, I'll give this one to you. So if you want to read what N Hilal had said, take it away.
So N Hilal says, so does that mean I can't show up and buy an AP Royal Oak chronograph? It depends. Right now, as things currently stand, it depends. Depending essentially on which authorized dealer you go to. If you happen to go to one that maybe has been having a bad month, or that maybe they just operate on a first come first served basis, if you come at the right time, maybe. But in the same way, it might be you'll go in and they'll have it back in the safe, waiting for someone who wants to buy, a rose gold 1159, or someone who wants to buy a millenary, and then they'll offer it as like, hey, would you perhaps be interested in this as well? It's not necessarily hard and fast rule. It'll depend entirely on the authorized dealer. Switching to the boutique only model, that ambiguity will be gone, but there are going to be some customers who will not be on the benefiting side of whatever AP decides is their prevailing policy.
Sure. But I think just going back again to adding one point to what you said, and which is absolutely correct, 100%, Fred, I think different model ranges from the Royal Oak are actually becoming even more difficult, up to N Hilal's point. So take something like the 15450 37 case size. This is something I used to see at the boutique. I don't know if you've witnessed that or not, Khalid. At the AP boutique, it would be sitting right there, right in front of you. Like it's right there. Maybe not the blue dial, maybe the white dial, but it was there. I was personally one of those people that was offered this piece some time ago. It is extremely difficult, and we're not talking about just shortage or fulfillment or shipment issues, but it's extremely difficult to get even a 37K size 15450, let alone a chronograph. Right. So the way basically AP operates here is that they've got two different type of lists. They've got a wish list, right? So you express your interest in a specific watch. You may not get it. that's the likelihood of it. And then you've got a boutique list, right? Which means that you're actually going to get the watch, but it just takes a very long time. You just don't know how long that time is. So that 37K size used to be on a boutique list that now had transitioned into a wish list. And we're talking about a 37 15450 simple date, smaller size. So just going back to N Hilal's point, I don't know about the AP chronographs, but even something like a 37K size 15450 is extremely difficult to get right now.
That's because, again, one more thing as well to take into consideration is obviously this pandemic. Most of these manufacturers were closed for a long time, and then Christmas has come, they close again. There are going to be delays. You ought to expect that most of these dealers are authorized dealers are not receiving pieces, and whatever you see, in terms of the market, whatever you see in the market today, you are basically, these are pieces that have been there for some time, and some people have been able to hold on to it floating it in the market. They are not pieces that are coming from authorized dealers. Because
I politely, Khalid, or slightly disagree with that for one simple reason, and I'm going to be brutally honest here, is that surely I understand that these pieces, in terms of like the quantity and the shipments, that may be affected due to COVID and the logistics, the whole situation. So fulfillments are delayed. I completely understand that. But what I can't understand is when I'm going to wait list, say, for this watch for over 2 years, even before discontinuing the old reference, right? So before the 15450, there was the 15400 in 37K size, right? So not only that I transitioned into the new one, but when I understand that, orders cannot be fulfilled right now, but I go online and look at classifieds, whether it be Chrono or whatever, and filter by UAE, and I see all the different dial colors, your white, your blue, your gray, everything is there, dated. Basically, it literally says there, this is a brand new piece from X months, then there is a big question, right? So if there is no fulfillment coming in, then how are these guys able to get brand new pieces in quantity that is available on classifieds? What I don't know what you think of that, but this is my own point of view. I don't think it's as limited as we're told.
Let me rephrase that. Again, when you compare the Middle East market to the others, it's very, very different. How are you allocated pieces? Do you know? Do you know how pieces are actually allocated? They are allocated based on points of sales. If you compare the boutiques that you've got in Europe in comparison to the boutiques that you've got in Dubai, you've got 2 boutiques in Dubai. So what makes sense is if you've got 50 boutiques in Europe, and you've got 2 boutiques in the UAE, in terms of production and amounts that are going to be received, who's going to receive more? The 50 boutiques have points of sales in comparison to 2 boutiques here in the UAE that have points of sales. Obviously, the places that have much more boutiques also have to be allocated pieces. So that's the way the division goes. So when you tell me you've got a piece from December, November, October, I understand, because certain boutiques may receive pieces and certain others may not receive pieces. Now, it all depends on how much allocation goes and how that whole cycle goes in the logistics side. With response to what you're saying, I agree with you, but when you look at the condition that we are in today, and when you compare us to places out of this region, you're going to see that our number of boutiques are numbered. You can count them on your fingers, right? So these pieces may be coming in from outside, and most of the pieces that you're going to see with any of the dealers here, not the authorized dealers, the dealers, the gray market dealers, most of them are going to be from out. I think 85 to 90% of these pieces are going to be from out, not from the region. If it's from the region, then that's a different matter altogether. You can have your point, and what you're saying would be valid. But I highly doubt that you will find a big amount of pieces that are from the region being sold with our gray market dealers here in the UAE. I can talk about the UAE, right? So what is the point? What's the issue? The issue is that the allocation given to this region is going to be much less to Europe, to China, US, to some of these other areas, to Japan as an example. They get a big chunk of pieces in comparison to this region.
Interesting.
Based on the point of sale.
Interesting. Khalid, we'll take a question.
What do you
think, before jumping into Fred's point of view, Khalid, there is a question from Shahid Rana. If you want to take that question away, if you're able to see it on the screen, Khalid.
Yeah.
So if you want
my question is related to the AP here. The price continues to increase whilst I have my eye on another watch. Sell or hold? Khalid's opinion.
I believe he's talking about the 15407 double balance. Double balance wheel open work. I think that's the one, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Again, when we talk about sell or keep, I am a very wrong person to ask that question, because I don't like to sell. Okay, so when you ask me that question, I'll probably tell you not to sell.
Al-Bakr.
And it's a beautiful piece. It's a beautiful piece. I don't think you should sell it, and you should be considered. Yani you're considered one of the lucky ones to actually be able to have a piece like this. I think you should definitely hold on to it. It's a beautiful piece. I'm sure you cherish it. I'm sure you love it. I think you probably treat it like your own baby, and take care of it like your own child. So don't sell it. Keep it, right? And I'm sure the price is going to keep on increasing, because these type of watches specifically are extremely rare, and you don't, and even AP does not make a lot of them. So I think it's a keeper. That's my view.
We have also another quick question. Do we jump into Fred's response to your question before taking another question in?
Sure, we can. Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with a lot of what Khalid said, and it's true that for one thing, the allocation from the factory to the boutiques is dependent on points of sale and also performance in those points of sale. And then to your point, talking about how there are gray market dealers where you'll see tons of, brand new models. Khalid is completely right. They can come from other regions. One of the advantages of being in the UAE is that it is a hub for the region, and it also is an area that is in a different situation in terms of reacting to COVID versus other regions of the world. There are other countries where the pandemic has hit them harder, where they haven't been able to adapt to moving online. And there are also other authorized dealers in other countries that don't necessarily have the financial backing of a big company like Siddiqui and Sons, that maybe they're smaller, maybe not full-on mom and pops, but they're smaller operations that have been hit a lot harder by the nature of their markets. So obviously they still need to move stock. They still need to maintain liquid to be able to maintain afloat, and also to obviously help them actually make money and operate as a business if they're not selling in their local market. And the UAE being a hub commercially for so many countries in the world, it's a very obvious choice to then sell to gray market dealers there. And with the internet, at the end of the day, it's an email away to be able to say, hey, I have XYZ watch in stock, I can ship it over, and because they know that they'll resell it. And these gray market dealers have networks all over the world to be able to capitalize on that. I remember at the beginning of COVID, there was a lot of watches going onto the market from regions like Hong Kong, China, Taiwan, areas that had been very, very heavily affected, because at that point, the pandemic was still new. We didn't know how long it was going to last. We didn't know how it would affect the market. So obviously those panic sales, at the end of the day, people with a bit of forethought and who have the financial backing to take that risk would have bought up stock. And that's how you have this amount that's available in one region while there's still scarcity going on in terms of the boutiques.
Very, very well said, Fred. There's a question from Dr. Omar. I'm going to take this question. Basically, Dr. Omar's question is: Grand Seiko is a true value competitor to Patek. Okay, I'm not really sure how to answer this question, but I'm going to give you a very general way of responding to it. With respect to design, and of course complication, with no shadow of a doubt, Patek would take over also in terms of value retention. But in terms of accuracy, we're of course, Grand Seiko will be a lot more accurate than your average Patek. What are your thoughts on my response, Khalid, for Dr. Omar's question? This is a very general question, but I had to give a very general answer.
It's a very interesting question. Dr. Omar, if you would have told me Credor instead of Grand Seiko, I would have actually gotten into a great debate with you. Credor is an amazing watchmaker. They're from Japan, and I would say for Japan they are the equivalent of Patek, like you've got the equivalent of Patek in Germany, or let's say on the German side being Lange, right? So if you want to put it in perspective, I would say Credor, Patek, Lange. Those are the three that we can talk about in specific. Grand Seiko is a great brand. I'm a very big fan of their snowflakes, their skyflakes. They are, without a shadow of a doubt, they make the best dials that are in the market today. They actually have a very great story to them. Their polishing. They've got something called as Zurutsu polishing. It's a very specific type of polishing that they do to their pieces, which is very unique. You can't find that type of polishing in any type of watches today. Grand Seiko is a great brand, but when you'd want to compare it to Patek, I don't think you can compare it in that manner. Personally, I think that if you'd want to compare, we can compare Credor to Patek, but otherwise, Grand Seiko is a great brand, really good stuff, and especially they have got an amazing inspiration. If you look at their office, the snowflake actually comes from the inspiration of the snow out of their office. I'm sure that you already know that, but just an additional pointer to give to this perspective.
Sure. We've got another. So, guys, just a quick note. We've got about 6 minutes to go for this call. If you have any question, keep them coming. This is the first one. I'm so humbled by having 22 attendees on this session in such a short notice. So thank you so much. But keep the question coming, basically. There is another one from Mamoon that was addressed to me. So I'm just going to basically give my 2 cents on it. So the question goes like, I also feel that the Royal Oak has done, sorry, is that the question? That does a second part to it. So hi, Rida, this is Akbar. Hope you're well. Just tuned in and wanted to ask you what you guys feel about the Royal Oak Offshore RG. This is rose gold on chrono. They are also demanding $85,000 for it. Is it a keeper? I also feel that the Royal Oak has done better than the Offshore. Would you think that the 42 rose gold is a good watch to buy now, new? Thank you. So in my honest opinion, I feel like the Royal Oaks Offshore, specifically the 42s and the new 44s in ceramic, the blue and the green, are doing very, very well. Yes, they do demand a premium. They're extremely difficult to get actually at retail. Are they going to be a keeper? I really don't know. I do not have enough knowledge about that. I'm personally on a wait list for one of the blue ceramics, basically Offshore in 44. My sweet spot, Amnoud, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, is always a 39 to a 41. If you've been following the channel, you know that's what I like to wear. But there is a huge exception to this 44 the way basically it wears, the way it tapers. Honestly, it looks a lot smaller than the size claim. And I see why people would want to have this watch. Now, is it going to hold value? Is it going to continue to hold value? Again, that taps into some of the points that I've addressed earlier in this video, is that with AP shutting down distribution points, with the new strategy of basically being in one central authorized dealer, central database, buying from AP New York, buying from AP Dubai, essentially to you is the same thing. I feel like that exclusivity push will maybe have the Offshore line basically climb up a little bit. If we go back in history and look at the Safari, for instance, it is holding its value very, very well. In fact, it's over the retail value that was claimed in 2008 and 2009 for it. So just following that, I think it will hold value. I think it will even increase in value. Today, it sells above retail. Is that going to continue for later? I'm not really sure. Khalid, what's your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on Offshores, or Fred, for example?
I think Fred, please go on, and I'll speak after you.
So yeah, I like the Offshore, but and especially in the 42 but historically, at least, barring a certain period, I think it was in the 2000s, maybe early 2010s, when big watches were essentially the thing everyone wanted. In general, I would say that the standard Royal Oak will perform better just because it's more accessible. Rida, like you mentioned, your sweet spot is sort of 39 to 41 That's how it is for most people. At the end of the day, not everyone can pull off or thinks they can pull off a 44 Offshore, for example. And that's just down to preference. It's down to a case of, if you look at most of the hottest watches, a lot of it is down to also wearability. You look at the Royal Oak, you look at the Nautilus, look at the steel Rolexes that perform the best. They're in that accessible size, and that adds to their appeal. At the end of the day, there's more competition for people who would be able to pull off, or would want to pull off something that's between that sort of 39 to 41 size. So I think the Royal Oak will always have that advantage over the Offshore, in addition to it's been around, it's been that classic for longer. So it also has that heads up in terms of history and building that reputation over time. Whereas the Offshores, I think, first came out in 1993 versus 1972 for the original Royal Oak. So there's also that time that they've had to build that reputation. And then the second part is also, I think, I agree with you. I think the Offshores will go up. I think we're seeing with AP, like with that example you brought up before of the 37 Royal Oak, that the rising tide is lifting all the boats. In general, as the brand gets more appreciation, we'll see more of their models trickle up. They won't jump up in the same way that the standard steel Royal Oaks do, but they'll still move up a little bit. And it's just a case of really, I think, just buying what you like and what you enjoy the most. There are definitely deals that can be gotten, or maybe better value in terms of how much watch you get for your money, maybe in the Offshore range. But who knows how long that'll last, because also as they start rolling out the in-house calibers, I think that'll drive a bit more excitement for the Royal Oak chronographs and the Offshore chronographs as well, because historically it's been in the Royal Oak chronograph you've had the Piguet movements, and then in the Offshores you've had the Dubois de Pras modules on top of the in-house calibers. So I think by having the rollout of that full in-house chronograph that they debuted on the 1159, that'll also drive more interest, because it's one more sort of value add to that, and it'll draw more attention to it. But yeah, I think in general though, the standard Royal Oaks will still be stronger in terms of resale value or value retention versus the Offshores, but they're still both great watches. And I think if you can pull off an Offshore and you like it, I definitely say go for that. At the end of the day, it's about getting what you like the most, you know?
No doubt, no doubt. Before I give it to Khalid for his input, I just wanted to add one thing to what Fred said, and I'm with you on that boat, Amon. I personally, as I said, looked at the ceramic blue Offshore, currently on a wait list for it, or a wish list, or whatever AP wants to call it. But I think one thing Audemars Piguet was able to do very, very well that delivers over any other brand is the legacy behind, wanting to dare and change and innovate and kind of play around with different color schemes and what's not. And this is very visible, very tangible when it comes to the Offshore line.
100%.
And so that goes with no shadow of a doubt. And that is, of course, something that, we as collector or people or watch enthusiasts basically like to experiment with. So even if one color scheme didn't work or one size didn't work, there is always that iteration of it. And I feel the 44 ceramic, ceramic basically Offshore green and black is going to continue to hold value. Today, AP is not shutting door and telling you cannot get on the list. You can get on the list. It will take time. It is a limited piece. But if that ever discontinues, then I think it's going to be what's going to even lift the Offshore line 10 times even higher. Khalid, I give it to you. What are your thoughts on Amon's question before taking another one?
Firstly, I would like to say something, comment on what Fred said. If you could pull off a 44 Offshore, I mean, if you're a Panerai person, you can pull off eventually anything. You could pull off a 48, you could pull off a 51, you could pull off a 44. It really depends. It goes back to what your preference is, and as Fred rightly said, you should get what you want. I'm not a very big fan of the Offshore, although you would see that Offshore was very early to the game, and you later on saw that Patek followed suit as they did in the initial times with the Jumbo as well, and they introduced the 5968 in comparison to the Offshore. I would call the Offshore phenomenal, to be honest, as a piece when it was introduced over 20 years ago. And since then, it's been key for AP. Apart from the Royal Oak side, the divers, the Offshores, that they have created beautiful pieces. I prefer the 42 more in comparison to the 44 and I like some color. So if you guys remember the orange, the yellow, and the green limited editions, and the blue one, which had come in earlier during those days, the chronograph ones.
Yeah,
I really like those. Yeah, I really like those. But the newer ones, to be honest, it's not for me. But it's a beautiful watch, no doubt. And I think if people can, as Fred said, pull it off, wear it, I would put the camouflage strap on it and wear it as a daily beater, especially the ceramic one.
Got a question from George. So basically, George, I'm on a hunt for one of the two watches, the open work double balance in steel. Okay, before even continuing the rest of the question, with no shot of a doubt, if you're able to get that, like I wouldn't even think about it twice. Or the 15500 in steel. What is your opinion? They're two different ball games, George. So of course, if you're able to get the double balance open work at retail, yes, of course, any day over the 15500. But if this is a case of picking it up from the aftermarket, then I think the 15500 is a better way to go. And then you get to join the club as well. I've got one here, and that's my personal preference. I would not pay a premium for the double balance. I've actually tried it on, and as nice as it looks, reading the time of it, it's like I can't even. It's not meant for time. It tells you everything but time. I hope that basically gives you some light. This is a response from the best of my knowledge. Khalid, I'm going to give you the next question. It's coming from S. Lal. Take it away, Khalid.
Would you change a black dial Royal Oak 2020 for a 2018 unworn 5711 white dial? Very good question. As I said again,
I gave you the question for a reason, by the way.
As I said to you, have you bought the Royal Oak 2020 at retail? If you bought it at retail and it's you've bought it personally, then no. I wouldn't change it, because it's your watch, it's under your name, and you'd rather have that than have a 5711, which has probably been, again, if it's a brand new one, again, you're going to be paying premium. And then again, you're going to be leveraging on that premium, which we spoke about earlier, right? If you bought it at retail. So 5711 white dial is not my thing. And personally, if you ask me, out of models, I'm not a big fan of the 5 complications. So my favorite Nautilus is the 5980, and then is the 5726, and then is the 5712, and then is the 5711. I don't like the 5990. I find it very bulky. But apart from that, if you would ask me this question again, I would say a Royal Oak 2020 unworn to fund a white dial. I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't, because you will now, and now you're going to be paying three times or 4 times that price which you were going to be paying 4 months ago. So it's not going to be a good decision, in my opinion.
Clarence Lim's got a question. Fred, I want to give this question to you. It's actually a very interesting question, very logical way to look at it. Take it away, Fred.
So Clarence is saying, hi, what do you guys think about the AP code 1159? Do you think the hype on the popular models will spill over into this model as well? Just like what is happening to the entire Rolex line. The simple answer to your question, do I think the hype will spill over? I definitely think the interest will, just as a natural progression. That being said, the 1159 didn't initially come out to much excitement. Everyone essentially treated it as if it was some sort of disappointment, but I personally really like it. And I think what's really important to notice is that AP, they could have easily killed that line and said it was just a limited run and then moved on. I think the fact that if you look at what they're doing, the evolutions that they've been doing, adding those fume dials, adding a few different variations, I think that shows that the brand is invested in this collection. They want to make it work. And I think the improvements they're making have been well received. And I think that'll continue. The line itself, I think it's great because I think this comes back to what we've touched on a few times throughout this discussion, is that AP is willing to experiment. They're willing to go out of their comfort zone. And it was a big move for them to create the 1159. At the end of the day, the majority of people who aren't maybe as invested in watches and who aren't living, breathing watches every day like we are, the majority of people just know AP for the Royal Oak and maybe the Offshore, which they look as just a bigger Royal Oak. You know, I think it was a gutsy move for AP to decide, okay, we can't just lean on this one design forever. we need to develop and bring more attention to our other lines and create another pillar for us to stand on. And I think it's clear that they are committed to that idea. I think the design is great. I love the fact that I think also online it doesn't do justice to pictures. You know, if you look at it straight on, it looks very basic, but when you see it in the metal, you see the different shapes and facets, the way they managed to include the octagonal shape throughout the mid case, the hollowed out lugs. There's so many cool details to that case shape alone, and that's in addition to the movements, in addition to the variants. Like the aventurine dial is stunning. So I think it's a really, really cool watch, and I think it will find its own place. And I think, like Khalid mentioned earlier, when they introduce it in steel, that's probably when things are going to blow up, because that's where the market is interested in. They want steel watches. And I think AP has been very smart in sort of slowly rolling it out, because they know that when they introduce it in steel, it will be an even bigger hit. So they're just sort of feeling things out and making sure they do things right.
I think the code 911 today is a gamble, but should AP execute their sort of roadmap to making the Royal Oak and very, very exclusive across 2021, closing those distribution channels, it's only sensible, Clarence Lim, to look at it from what had happened with Rolex, something like an Oyster Perpetual, the new candy color Oyster Perpetuals, the turquoise, the coral red, the yellow and whatnot. They're going through the roof. They're selling for ridiculous prices. This is a line that is supposed to be entry level. So it's only fair to say that if the Royal Oak gets to a point in steel where it's impossible to get, regardless whether it's a 15500, 15450, or whatever it may be, then yes, maybe that's going to spill over to the other model range. And I think the code 1159 would be the next one to climb up a little bit, and immediately after some of the offshores. So it's only right to look at it this way. Khalid, there's a couple of questions coming in. I mean, this is fantastic. This is the first live session we have on Watch Society. We had over sort of 40 people come in and out, which is fantastic. But do you want to take this question away, Khalid? It's actually addressed to me, but I want to give that to you, considering I've taken the last question. Go for it. It's from Watch and Pray.
There are actually a few questions there, Rida. There is the one from Alex, and there's the one from Washington. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So maybe we take in Watch and Pray first, because it came in first, and then we take Alex's after that. Go ahead, Khalid.
Okay. So the AD says I need to buy a 38mm chrono before even discussing 15202. Is that how it works in Dubai? Need buying history first. Exactly what we were saying earlier, right? So exactly what we said. It doesn't matter where you. I probably would think the more that I think more people that would be sharing this information with us, we're going to be more inclined towards thinking about how people in Europe, how the boutiques in Europe operate, how the boutiques in the US and the other areas or other regions operate. So it's not about buying the history; it's about them understanding that you are a genuine collector. You are somebody who is going to be keeping the pieces. You are not a flipper. You're not a person that is going to be making quick buck out of this piece. And it's more about them getting to know you more than buying a history. That's what I believe that they want to do. So everywhere it's the same. You can't go into any boutique and ask for the hottest piece that they have. You're never going to get it. It's like going into any other boutique, going into Rolex and asking for a Sky Dweller Blue Dial or a Daytona, or going into Patek and asking for a 5711. Okay, 6711, maybe the new 6711. But yeah, something that's going to be the hottest piece, the next hottest piece. So yes, anywhere you go, you're going to have the same problem, but you need to start with any dealer on the right way. Build up your profile with them. Make them understand that you are a genuine dealer and you will never have a problem. Yeah? Great.
So we've got a question. Thank you so much, Khalid. We've got a question from Alex. Hey, do you guys wear your scratches on your watches, or do you guys polish, buff it, scratches out? Thank you in advance. This is my own personal opinion. I think polishing a watch, whether it be a Rolex, AP, or whatever luxury watch that is, requires, of course, deassembling the watch, the case, removal of internal parts, and movement, which is
Thank you,
not
Fred.
something I'm willing to do every time I have a small scratch. To me, these are the battle scars. I'd like to keep them, so it's not something that I would want to do. Maybe somewhere 5 years down the line, I would consider it. But not something that it's not my go-to. No, I would wear it with scratches. No matter of fact, my 15500, I dropped a tear on this one, but it already has some scratches on it. That felt really, really bad, Alex. But you know what? It's not worth trimming or eating up basically a layer just to make it look shinier, because I'm going to scratch it again. And I would rather keep it that way. So I hope that makes sense. Do we have any more questions? Or Khalid or Fred, if you guys want to give your input to Alex's question about polishing as well. I believe this is the last question we have. We're on 21 viewers live. If you guys have any questions, please bring it in. This is the last couple of minutes before we close the
I,
session.
I
Khalid, go
mean,
ahead.
on polishing, I'll just give one point. I am against polishing, to be honest. The more scratches that my watches have, I'm actually happier with that, because it makes me realize how much this watch is going through during my daily life. Sometimes we go and we are having such a rough time, we don't know what's happening. So we eventually look at our watch and we see all those scratches and realize what we're going through every day in the process. So it reminds me a lot of things, and I personally like to keep my watches as natural as possible as they came. So even if it's fully scratched up, I would not polish. I have never polished my watches unless I've bought one on the pre-owned market, been polished. Otherwise, I personally never polish. If I give in my watches for service, they ask me, do you want us to polish this for you? And my answer to that is always a no. So I would not recommend polishing your watches. Fred, the mic is over to you.
For me, it's the same thing. For me, at the end of the day, scratches happen. And just like Khalid said, they can also be a memory. Like, for example, I remember the first scratch I got on my Omega, which was the watch that started this all for me. It was from the seatbelt on the airplane leaving Sydney. I remember I went to sleep. I woke up in Singapore airport when the flight had landed. Looked at the bottom of my watch, nice solid scratch on the clasp, But I know that, and that was an important trip for me, and that's something that I will carry with me. Obviously, not every scratch is going to have a story, but it's the story. At the end of the day, they're all little footnotes in the story of the time that you're with your watch. And also, the other thing is that it takes away from the watch every time you polish it. These are nice luxury things that we buy for the craftsmanship, for the way they're shaped, for the way they're finished. The more you polish it, you're not necessarily always going to be getting it polished by someone who's, as good as whoever made it in the factory. And B, you're taking away from that every time. It's very difficult for it to have the same results, the same look and feel. Edges will be smoothed over. It's not going to be quite as crisp. And I would rather maintain that crispiness versus having something that maybe doesn't have scratches, which will then get scratches again, but that, isn't in that same craftsmanship quality. What I will say though is that if you are bothered about scratches, because I don't like seeing them necessarily either, but also most of my watches are satin finish and scratches don't show up as much. They still show, but not as much. So if you're worried about scratches but maybe don't want to polish your watches, I would say try out for watches that are satin finish. Obviously, if you're really worried about scratches, then get ceramic because it doesn't scratch. Because obviously, I think scratches do hurt a lot more when you see them on high polish, just because they show a lot more.
Yes.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Actually, Fred, Watch and Pray made a very interesting comment. So he goes like, a good perspective on scratches as a reflection of your hustle. So well said. Clarence Lim says, thanks for your answer and thought. I love my code 1159, that is, but seeing lower resale rates on chrono is demoralizing sometimes. I know what you mean. I never owned one, but I can understand how does that feel. Hopefully the line gets the credit it deserved. It's a better movement than the Royal Oak. with date, the 15500, that's for sure. Maybe it's the same movement, actually. I think it's the same movement with the same power reserve. So, of course, it deserves a lot more credit. Let's just see how 2021 treats us. Before I close the session, I want to put myself or being the consumer or the buyer's perspective, and I want to take some value from this session. And this question is addressed from me to you, Fred and Khalid. Out of the two brands, and Khalid, I know you're pro Patek, but let's just take a stand here that is fair for everyone. Out of the two brands, AP and Patek, I've got basically money to spend on either. Which is a better or best, if that word even exists, brand? Making, of course, a choice between the two brands is quite tricky, since these two brands are, I think, in my opinion, Khalid, today, and I know you're not going to agree with this, they're evenly matched. That's what I think, right? And I'm going to stick to that. Now, the course of action to determine which is better, which one do I go for? Do I go for, say, a Nautilus, or do I go for a 15202, for example? In your opinion, what would be a good pick between the two brands? Say for someone who's looking to invest in one watch and one watch only, and it's between those two brands. What would you say to that, Khalid?
I think I'll let Fred first talk about this, and then I'll get into it.
All right,
because if I start talking, you won't be in today.
Okay.
So I'd like to keep it very short.
Okay. I know Khalid's answer is going to do a lot to do with functionality over brand first. Let's just park that on the side, Fred. Take it away.
Okay, so this is a tough one for me because I will preface this by saying that my actual preference between the Holy Trinity is Vacheron, but that's not on the cards for the question. So I'll address the actual question itself. And for me, it's tough because the way I look at it, if I have to pick a brand, and let's assume I'm somewhat held to this decision for the foreseeable future, I feel Patek, you can always trust that it will be the same Patek in 10 years, in 20 years, in 30 years. I feel that by virtue of the way they've operated as a business, you can always count on them for consistency and quality, consistency in their designs. Between the two, they're definitely the more conservative brand, which does give you a certain amount of stability. And you can be confident that the brand you like today will still be the same brand that you like in 50 years, I would imagine. On the other hand, I do normally value audacity, dynamics, changes, and Audemars Piguet is reflective of that. I like the direction that they're going, especially with things like the 1159, like the remaster series that they just did. I thought that was a masterwork in terms of approaching this idea of a reissue, but they were very selective with it. In my view, they kept the right things true to history. I can't imagine that AP is going to stop doing that anytime. So it means that also in future, maybe AP will be a different beast to where it is today. We've seen how they've changed. The Royal Oak itself was a huge change for the brand overall when it came out. They departed from, making dress watches, high complications. I mean, they still make those obviously, but they completely shifted what their brand is and how it's perceived today versus what it was before. In Patek's sense, I think they added that, but they kept doing what they always did and managed to keep a bit more balance in that sense. So I'm going to go on a limb and I'm going to pick AP on the hope that it will still be the AP I like the most. And also because purely subjectively, I like the look of the Royal Oak more than the Nautilus. So that makes it that.
This is the only time where a fashion look can, I think, come very close to prestige. Now, before I give it to Khalid, because I know Khalid is absolutely going to butcher this.
I know, I say all this knowing I'm probably going to get completely screwed.
Is that, look, for a savvy collector, of course, for a savvy
Be nice, Khalid, please.
For a savvy watch collector, this is my pick. Obviously, it's going to be the AP, this guy over here. But generally, for a savvy collector or someone who's new as well, both brands are instantly recognizable, right? That goes without no shadow of a doubt. Both hold value. That's something completely out of the equation, and it's not even the right way to look at or decide which one you should go for. Patek Philippe, of course, is a great choice in terms of more to do with its history, its prestige, etc. While AP is maybe slightly ahead of someone that doesn't look at it from a complication perspective, I think AP is slightly ahead in terms of, its fashion and its looks. Basically, it's on a profile of a lot of celebrities. They had a lot of brand ambassadors, in fact, even for their Offshore line. I think from that aspect, it's there. But as I stand today, I will have to go with AP, because as George also mentioned here in the comment, there is a lot of room for growth for AP. I completely agree with that. A lot of people compare the Patek to the Bentley and compare the AP to the Porsche. You know what? I don't mind having the Porsche as the only car. In my own opinion, it's not just a sporty watch. There is nothing sporty about this watch. In fact, it's a very classic watch as well at the same time. So for me, I'll have to go with the AP, and I've got even more reasons, but I want to give Khalid the opportunity to butcher this completely.
Okay, so two things. The king never says I'm the king. That's number one. Just joking. Patek, generally, Patek has the history behind it. I would say that whoever goes for Nautilus generally is going in for hype. I discourage that, if you ask me. I'm a very big Calatrava fan. I love my 3940s, 5940s. I love the DNA that Patek has and what they have built their empire on, if you like. From the annual calendars to perpetual calendars to the weekly calendars, they are more into calendars and complications. World timers and so on. Look at the 5131P. You can look at many of the Calatrava models today and just say, all right, Patek is just on a different level. If you talk about complications, we can't compare. There is no apple to apple here. Now, when it comes to the brand itself, they have held their own. Yes, when the quartz crisis took place, they did have to make the same change that we got from the Royal Oak 5.2 at the time. And they also gave a bigger gamble than AP. I agree that AP went out and created the 5402, but don't forget, at a time where 33, 32, 34 mm's were a norm, Patek created a 42 mm 37, which was a more bigger gamble than AP, but it succeeded later. They reaped the benefit way later. Now, I am not a very big Nautilus fan, although I love the Nautilus as well. But if you give me a choice between a 5212 today and any Nautilus or any Aquanaut for that matter, I will go for a 5212, and I wouldn't go for a Nautilus or an Aquanaut, because the Nautilus is driven, unfortunately. Beautiful pieces. They are people have in your collection. They look amazing aesthetically. The Nautilus, the 5701, looks spot on, very close to what the 3700 was back in the days. But from a complication perspective, I would have to say Patek takes precedent here in comparison to AP. I love what AP is doing, but I wouldn't say that they are on the same par as Patek. I'm sorry, Radha. My opinion, Fred. I feel that Patek is way more ahead in the game when occasions, and I'm a complication person. Again, it goes back to preference and what people want aesthetically. For me, if you ask me, the best sports watch to have been created to date, I would say is the 5402, honestly. But complication-wise and what they have been doing over the years, Patek is way ahead. Now, in terms of what people like, obviously you get a lot of dress watch feeling from Patek nowadays when you look at some of their Calatrava pieces. Keeping the Nautilus and the Aquanauts on side, they are more into the dress side. They are more into the formal side. All of those platinum watches that you see, the titanium, basically the other steel watches that you see, which are very, very rare, they are all going towards more formal side of things. So I personally, as I said, I'll have to go with Patek, and I'm a very big Patek fan. So I would say that Patek is is what I go with today. I feel, and I feel, okay, sorry, I won't say, I say
Yeah, that was a big one.
agree to that.
So,
Others may have a preference to
yeah.
AP, but I personally like the way they innovate every time and the things that they keep on doing with similar cases that they have, but they keep on, introducing new complications which other brands are not really doing today. So that's what I Patek the most.
Okay, well said, Khalid. The one thing that I will just kind of like quickly, I guess, bring up as well is that when you talked about the 5212, the weekly calendar, I don't think it's just a classic watch. I think it's, even though it's on a leather strap, it still has a sporty vibe about it in a very weird way. So I think it's between both. It's a very nice watch. I see why this is your preference. Maybe in future as well, we could discuss this a little bit more. If you guys have any last comments, that would be great. That would be it for this.
Yes, one last thing, Rada.
Go
One
ahead.
last point I wanted to comment on. Patek does not need brand ambassadors.
Patek has a smaller. All right, since you're going there, Patek Philippe has a smaller selection than Audemars Piguet. There's not a lot of room for choice there, Khalid. You know that. I mean, I'm happy to have this debate, but generally speaking, not only that they're harder to come by, of course, the prestige, the history is there, availability is another question, but I think AP has a lot of room for growth. I think AP is the way forward for 2021. This is a subject that I want to elaborate even on more, and not just based on complication, right? So that should not be the only factor. But this is my opinion again. I know your opinion. I know your point of views. Fred as well. Is there any closing comments from anyone, any of our viewers as well? Is there anything in? Yes, Clarence Slim say AP is more daring in design and appeal to the younger crowd, 100% with no shadow of a doubt. George says Patek can't fill their 80s cabinets at all. There is no spot. Yes. So no use for brand ambassadors, 100%. I feel like this can go on even. I see both sides, but I personally agree with you, George and Clarence, for my own reasons. Khalid and Fred maybe not. I'm not sure. Fred is like in the middle here.
I mean, like, one thing I think in this discussion, at the end of the day, I've come to realize it's very difficult to really pit entire brands against each other because they're not really apples to apples. Like, I think at the end of the day, when you do comparisons, you kind of have to go down onto an individual watch level because as a brand, even Patek and Audemars, despite having so much shared in similar history, they're fundamentally very different brands in how they approach watches. And I think it makes it hard to compare the two because there's so many.
But I think Patek also needs to wake up a little bit and understand exactly what people are looking for. We're dealing with a new generation altogether today that is not just after, what used to be hot a long time ago. Now, of course, there is different.
But they've done that, Rada.
They've done that with what exactly?
5968.
Have you tried on? I mean,
the 5968.
Let's talk about the 5711. What do you think about the clasp of that 5711, Khalid, for that price point as well? Hello, Khalid? Can you hear me?
You're cutting off.
All right.
No, I'm saying that Patek have done that with the 5968, with bringing in color, the orange, the 42. It has come to compete with the Offshore. It is actually trying to reach out to the younger generation. And they've already started getting into that, even though, which I said earlier, but the 5968, bringing in the orange, bringing in those colorful colors, is actually trying to cater to the younger generation.
How many pieces?
And they are going to that step.
Khalid, any idea? It's not for the mass, right?
Also, one more. But also one more thing that you need to take into consideration. Sorry, Rada, I'm running out on battery, but I like to. And the Nautilus, they have done a lot of other things. You've got the 5740, the perpetual calendar. Again, Royal Oaks don't have type of complications. So as Fred said, you can't compare it apple to apple when it comes to each models. But in a nutshell, I think that's what it is. And shit.
We can still see you, Khalid.
Just from a different perspective.
Khalid, you just went horizontal or vertical, that is. Okay.
I think his battery died.
I think his battery died already. Well, thank you guys so much for your support. Thanks for attending. This is something that we plan to hold every other week. Fred, thank you so much for joining us today as well.
My pleasure, man. Thanks for inviting me on.
And if you guys always want to, if you want to see more of this coming, just let me know in the comment section down below. And then, of course, we'll make it happen. Unfortunately, Khalid couldn't say his goodbyes.
Yeah.
On a different layout right now, but we'll end it at that. So thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Bye-bye.